And if you come into business development or real estate development thinking you're going to get very wealthy very quick, you'll be very disappointed because it won't be very quick, and success is not guaranteed, but your chances of success go up with hard work, being conscientious, and doing all the things that you need to do and planning properly of what you need to do.
Salim Development Group.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Tahir Salim, CEO of Salim Development Group. Today, we're going to talk about some insight through real estate development, business development, franchising, and some of my personal experiences and personal challenges. So one great thing about business development and real estate development is that you can pass it on to your children and grandchildren and so on. It's a great feeling, and also it gives your children and grandchildren an advantage, an avenue that they can pursue their own goals of doing other things, or there's already something ready for them, whether it's business or real estate or whatever. And they can go right in your footsteps. They can learn from their parents and their grandparents and go into that business and those type of ventures. I think leaving a legacy for your children and your grandchildren is so powerful. Their options are far greater with that than without it. For example, I worked hard. I went to school, college, university, engineering, and got into business. And now I am where I'm at is at a very comfortable place. But the greatness of legacy is after 57 years, wherever I've reached, that could be the starting point for my children and my grandchildren. So whenever they come into business, I'm talking about my grandchildren. So my children, 3 of my sons are already working with me, and the 4th one is going to law school, who eventually also plans to work with me in our businesses. But there's a huge advantage, as I mentioned. So my 25-year-old son would be able to do what I'm doing at age 57. And my grandchildren, whatever I get to when I'm 75, that could be their starting point. So they could reach at heights which I could not have even dreamed of. So legacy is very important. It's very hard to go from here to here in one generation, but if one generation can take it from here to here, the next generation can take it from here to here. So I think it's very lucky for a family to have someone who has that mindset and who's able to create that. So my legacy, or the legacy I want to leave behind, is when I'm 70 years old, plus minus. At that time, my sons completely take over the businesses that we have under Salim Development. My 3 sons who are working with me now, and my 4th son who's studying to be a lawyer at George Mason University, those 4 together would be running all the business that we have now, plus the businesses that we develop from now until I retire. And I'm looking very forward to my sons enjoying the benefits of my hard work. And of course, I would hope that they will all work very hard and leave the same thing for their children. So some of the very important lessons I've learned in business and in development is it always takes longer to do than what you think it's going to do. It almost always costs more money, and there will always be challenges that you could not have foreseen. You will have unforeseen challenges, so there's no way to prepare for every single challenge. Obviously, overall, you can prepare, good education, high school, college, good work experience, good networking, but there are some challenges that are unforeseen, and that was a unique aspect. I may not have realized when I was going to university or college that when you get into business, there are areas, issues that come up that nobody can teach you. You have to go through it yourself, and you have to have those habits that you develop over the years to get you through those difficult moments or difficult situations. The other thing I want to talk about is the turning point in my career. Is when I think about it, it puts a smile on my face. It's a really very fond experience. I was working with City of Los Angeles as an engineer and started investing, basically started construction of a restaurant, and it was a Wiener Schnitzel in Marietta. I was still employed with the city, but I was on a leave of absence. And I wasn't sure if I was going to quit or basically leave my position to operate or build restaurants, or if I was just going to manage as an owner with having a general manager in the store. Very unique experience. I had the leave of absence, and that's when we opened our first restaurant. It was very successful, and I gave my notice to resign about 3-4 weeks after we opened the restaurant. But prior to opening was also very, very unique experience as well. I had applied to become a full franchisee with Wiener Schnitzel, and I got denied. They did not approve my franchise application, and I was very, very disappointed. But instead of giving up, I had a meeting with the franchise franchise director and asked them what were the reasoning behind them turning me down. And they said, well, your degree's in chemical engineering, you get paid well, and it's something that you might not like doing day-to-day operations in a restaurant. Well, I told them that I know myself, I know my capabilities, and I would like to become a franchisee. And also, I am not going to stop at one restaurant. I will become a multi-unit franchisee, and eventually I will be building or developing my own restaurant. To make a long story short, I reapplied and they approved me. So getting approved from Wiener Schnitzel was pretty dramatic. It wasn't very simple or straightforward. Anyway, so when we did open the first restaurant, right before we opened the first restaurant, something very interesting happened. The number of employees I hired were half as many as the actual number of employees we needed. And one thing I learned during our first opening is you don't hire the number of employees that you need, you hire more than that because you always open with higher sales volume and your employees are not very well trained, so you have more employees than you need. So when I was told when I read the directions or the guideline that I'm supposed to have 24 employees, I thought that was not correct, and I hired 12 employees. It turned out I should have had 24 employees. So the area manager was there and asking where the other 12 employees, we didn't have them. And right there, they were going to send the training team back. But what I did was something pretty cool, pretty drastic. My sister, my father, and my mother were visiting my family members 280 miles away. So I called them, I said, it's an urgent matter, please come back, we need to talk. So they did not know what the urgent matter was, but they knew it was something very urgent. So when they came to Marietta, they said, what's the urgency? I said, well, you need to get to work. That was 3 more employees. So that made it 15, and we were able to hire 2 or 3 right off the street to come to 17. We were able to start this opening of the store within 17, and within the next 4 or 5 days, I hired the other 4 or 5 employees to come to that 22 to 24 number. So without that, I guess, drastic step, we would have been delayed in our opening, and it would have been more embarrassing as well. So that was a pretty unique experience that I always think about, and I chuckle. So once my dad, my mom, and my sister started working, my sister was there for about a week and a half, probably maybe 2 weeks. My dad worked for about 2 months, and my mom worked for 6 months. It was very unique, very fond experience when I look back, when I had my father and my mother and even my sister work in the same store where I just had opened. So anyway, that was very unique. Another very unique experience we had was building a store in Torrance, California, a Wiener Schnitzel. Originally, this Wiener Schnitzel was going to be a lease. We were going to lease the land, called a ground lease, and build a restaurant on it. So we started working on the lease. The lease was about 180 pages long, massive, and took almost a year to negotiate the lease because the attorneys involved. So once we had the lease approved, then we tried to get a loan with the bank, and the bank was very hesitant to give us a loan because it was a ground lease. And there was another problem with that location, which was contaminated soil, and it was cleaned up. It was Boeing property originally. It was sold to a group called Vestar, and the Vestar was a landlord, and Boeing had a guarantee of $25 million for any problems that could come up in the future. So the site was cleaned and had some guarantee by Boeing, but still banks were hesitant. Eventually, we went back and talked to Vestar, the owners of the property, and said, we're having difficulty with getting a loan. Can you sell us the property? They eventually agreed to sell the property, and in order to sell the property, they had to parcelize it, and the parcelization took, instead of 6 months, took 2.5, 3 years. So by the time we started construction, or we're ready to start construction, it was 4 years. And when we went to the bank to get the loan approval, the bank had issue again, saying, well, the soil was contaminated, and they did not want to move forward with the loan process. And after carefully the documentation and looking at the businesses that were open in the shopping center, I had a meeting with a senior loan officer and explained to them that there's a $25 million guarantee behind any contamination. Whatever we do is not going to cost anything more than a few $100,000. Secondly, I was able to convince them that there's a Taco Bell and a Carl's Jr. few hundred yards away in the same vicinity, and they got approved, so you should also approve this loan. They eventually approved the loan, and we did build that. So that was a very unique experience I went to. On the same project, I went to another difficulty, which was during the middle of the construction, the general contractor filed for bankruptcy. We were about 80% done, 20% of the project was left, maybe 25%, and the contractor was a no-show. He had filed bankruptcy. The monies we had advanced were proportional to the amount of work we done, so there weren't any financial issues. However, However, we had nobody to build a restaurant, and economy was doing very well, and I could not get any other general contractor to finish it. So I became the general contractor and the superintendent and the project manager. I was doing all the work that everybody else was supposed to be doing. And at the end, not only did we finish the project, but we came $43,000 under the original budget. That was one of the most fond memories I have of all the development projects I've done. One piece of advice I wish I knew when I was starting out in real estate development was to have higher cash flow or have liquidity available to you, whether it's through other family members or a bank, because if there's a problem in the business development and it's taking longer to open that business, or if there's a problem in the construction or problem anywhere in the process, the only way you're going to fix it is having additional funds. So I feel that any developer in the past and even more in the future should be thoroughly educated to understand the complex knowledge that they need to do these projects. You have to deal with the cities, maybe the county. You have to deal with state on certain issues, especially if it's environmental. You have to deal with different employment agencies. You have to deal with the Board of Equalization. You have to deal with the health department. You have to deal with planning, building department. You have to deal with fire department. You have to deal with other departments in the city, such as public works, for sewer, water. You have to deal with work it took, enormous. And if you come into business development or real estate development thinking you're going to get very wealthy very quick, you'll be very disappointed, because it won't be very quick, and success is not guaranteed, but your chances of success go up with hard work, being conscientious, and doing all the things that you need to do and planning properly of what you need to do. Thank you for watching today's podcast on insight on real estate development and business development that I was able to share with you guys. Join us next week, Friday, for our next podcast.
Salim Development Group.